رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Inshallah, just reading from page number 96.
Suffa-tul-islam inshallah.
96.
So Bismillah. You say the witr prayer is wajib. So that's the first ruling that he gives you, that the witr prayer is wajib. So the highest level of ibadah is the fard in terms of the fiqh aspect, and then after the fard we have wajib, those things which are also necessary. One of the key or the main distinction between a fard and a wajib, the key difference between a fard and a wajib is that the proof of the fard is so strong that if you deny the fard, then you commit kufr. So like for example, namaz is fard, is proven, and there's so much proof and evidence for the fard that anyone who says namaz is not fard or you don't have to pray, then he's going against the evidence of the Quran and Sunnah, which is so strong that it leads to disbelief. Saying, for example, fasting in the month of Ramadan, if someone says you don't have to fast, you don't have to respect your parents. Right? The evidence for these things are so strong that if you deny them, then you've done kufr. Then your second level would be a wajib. It's still necessary to do those things. But now, the evidence for the wajib is not as strong as the fard. Hence, you're still sinful for denying it. You're still sinful for leaving the wajib. But it won't lead you to the level of kufr. So, for example, someone said you don't have to read your fard of Isha. You don't have to read Isha namaz. You'll say that leads to kufr, someone denying namaz. Then if someone says you have to read your namaz, but you don't have to read the witr, it's still a sin, it's a guna, because why? It's wajib. But you won't say he's done inkar of namaz. You won't say it's to the level of denying the prayer, and it won't be to the point of disbelief. This is like one of the loose or the main distinction between a fard and a wajib. But yeah, they're both, you need to do both of them. That's a key thing to keep in mind. Then it says the witr, it consists of 3 rak'ahs, prayed together with 1 salam. So in the Hanafi school, witr namaz is of 3 rak'ahs. You have others who pray witr as 1 witr, right? But in the Hanafi school, the stance and the opinion is that witr is of 3 rak'ahs with 1 salam. And in the 3rd rakat, before you go into ruku, so you read, for example, Surah Al-Fatiha. After Surah Al-Fatiha, you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Surah Ikhlas. And then before you go to ruku, you do Allahu Akbar by raising your hands to your ears, and then you read Dua Qunut. And then you will do your ruku and sajda. You finish after rakat as normal. And also it's mentioned here that Dua Qunut is something that you read all year round. It's not only that you do in Ramadan, but so it's something that is done all year round. You'll often hear something about the witr, and this is something that if you're exposed to social media and following TikToks and these dawah boys that, or in these mosques they read witr in the masjid. Witr is something you're supposed to read at the end of the night. This witr should be read after or the best time to read, put it that way. The best time to read your witr namaz is after Salatul-tahajjud. So if you read tahajjud namaz and you got an adat and a habit of reading tahajjud namaz, then which should be the last portion of the night, so the last 3rd or the last 6th, right? So if you have the habit of reading with tahajjud namaz, you wake up, read your tahajjud, if you got time for 2 rakats, 4 rakats, 6 rakats, 8. So ideal tahajjud is 8 rakats. So you read your tahajjud and then you finish off the night with your 3 witr, and then if you're gonna fast, obviously your sahur will finish at that time as well, and then lastly, obviously Fajr will kick in. So before Fajr, the last portion of the night, that's when you read your witr. But unfortunately in this modern time, we can't get up for Fajr namaz. So that's why it's become a adat and habit that people finish off the witr in the masjid. Because normally when we leave the masjid, what happens? We get busy with worldly affairs, we get lazy. If you think I'm gonna read the rest at home, then we start being more lazy at home. So what happens? People read the fard namaz with jamaat, and obviously sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ would read sunnah prayers at home as well. So why do we read everything in the masjid? It's so that we don't miss them. But here and now, we'd rather spend 5-10 more minutes, read the full namaz, and then once we leave, we won't have, one, the responsibility thinking I'm going to witr to do. Second, obviously if your wudu breaks, then that extra, that shaitani waswasa, oh you have to do wudu now, I'd rather miss the witr out. There's no option of that. So you're cutting out all these extra things. That's how people start reading all the namaz in the masjid. Why? Because they finish it off and then once they leave, they're free. But if you are a person who reads tahajjud or wakes up before Fajr, anytime before Fajr, let's say anytime, then you can read your witr at that time. In Ramadan, it's quite easy to do that. But in Ramadan, as the next point mentions, the witr are done in jamaat. So if you read Suffa-tul-islam in the masjid, then this is the only time in Ramadan you read your 3 witr with the imam. And so he mentions here, a group can pray the witr in congregation in jamaat in the month of Ramadan. And then obviously they'll get the reward of reading namaz with jama'ah. So now they just mention as a side note, if you read your witr with the jamaat, right, and that's straightforward, that will only happen in Ramadan and you get the reward of jamaat. But they say, imagine you joined late, you went to do wudu, you came back, the imam is in ruku in the 3rd rakat, so you actually missed the dua qanut out. But you joined him in ruku, then the imam's dua qanut will be your qanut as well. You've basically caught the rakat, that means whatever he read, you're included in that as well. So you won't need to, when you stand up for your 2 rakats that you missed, you don't need to add dua qanut, it's already considered done. So that's the brief summary of 3 witr. The next dimension, sunnah mu'akkadas. So after the fard, we have the wajib. After the wajib is sunnah mu'akkadah, they emphasized sunnahs. First they're going to talk about those which are 2 rakats. So he mentioned in the footnote, he says, they emphasize meaning that these prayers are close to the ruling of a wajib with regard to sin. Since omitting and emphasize sunnah persistently without any excuse entails a serious blame and misguidance. So here they mention, like youngsters these days say, oh, you don't need to read your sunnah. It's only sunnah, you can miss the sunnah out. Here, this one he's touching upon. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ shouldn't be taken lightly. That we shouldn't have this attitude of missing out sunnah. And it should be done as a last resort. For example, you're traveling on the motorway, you think your journey is hard, you can miss your sunnah. You're unwell, for example, you're just about going to read your fard, then because of your ill health, you can miss your sunnah. Now you've got valid reasons not to pray your sunnah, right? Because your health doesn't permit, maybe you haven't got the strength to do it, and so on. But just sitting at home, you're playing PlayStation, get up, read your chart first, and then start playing PlayStation again. That's not a good reason. Same with watching TV, watching dramas, what people do, playing on the phone, watching, playing on the phone is more, with the elderly, TikTok, they watch more TikTok than the youngsters, right? And so, so generally, the phone has not only an issue for the kids, it's a problem for adults as well. And so generally what happens, we start lacking in our namaz, cutting time out because of social media and so on. But only if you got a valid reason you should miss, right? But the sunnah mu'akkadas, they should be read in all cases. It's like the wajib. So he also mentions here now what is considered as sunnah mu'akkadah. This time with the 2 rakats of namaz. So the 2 before Fajr. But the two before Fajr, they are basically the most strongest of the sunnahs. They should never be missed out, put it that way. Even if the Jamaat has started, in all the other namaz, Jamaat has started, you missed a sunnah, for example, for Zuhr. You came in, Jamaat has started, you do not read your 4 sunnahs. You join the Imam. But for the Fajr sunnahs, because they're so important, even if the Jamaat has started, if you think I can make it for the Jamaat, after reading my 2 sunnah, you have to read your sunnah. So you read your 2 sunnahs, then you join the Imam. But if you think that, if I read my 2 sunnahs, I'm going to miss the Jamaat, then you join the Jamaat. Right? And generally the ulama mentioned that even when you do qaza namaz, qaza is only of the farz and the wajib. So it'll be the 2 rakat of Fajr, 2 of Fajr, 4 of Zuhr, 4 of Asr, 3 of Maghrib, 4 of Isha. But the wajib, the 3 witr will also be read qaza as well. So that's something important to keep in mind. But when it comes to Fajr 2 sunnah, the ulama mentioned, if you're doing qaza, like imagine you woke up as sunrise happened, you woke up 1 hour late, you missed Fajr. You do qaza of the sunnah and the farz. Right? So you do qaza of the 2 sunnah of Fajr and the 2 farz as well. So that's how important the 2 sunnah of Fajr are. It's also mentioned here in the footnote, this prayer is the most emphasized of all sunnahs according to the sound opinion. Yes, some even deem it wajib, due to which, as opposed to some other sunnah prayers, is general voluntary. So here they're just mentioning the same thing I've mentioned here. Extra thing that they mentioned here is farz namaz can't be read in a car. Your farz namaz can't be read sitting down. Without a valid excuse, you can't read your namaz sitting down, your farz namaz. But your sunnahs and your nafal, when you say nafal, you can sit down and read. And people read the 2 sunnah and nafal sit down. Nafal in this aspect means everything apart from fard. Everything apart from the fard is considered nafal. So the sunnah mu'akkadas, they broadly fall into nafal. The sunnah ghair mu'akkada, nafal. And then what we call nafal is basically the lowest level mustahab. Right? All these 3 apart from the fard will be considered as nafal. So they all can be read sitting down. So imagine you're traveling in a car, you can read your 4 sunnah sitting down. And then get up and read your fard, park the car up, read your fard, for example, if you're a passenger. Obviously the driver won't be reading his namaz, right? Yeah? Unless he's in too much of a rush. But generally this will be the case. So that's what they mentioned here, that the 2 sunnahs of Fajr, you're not even allowed to sit down and read them. That's how important they are, because they're close to wajib. So even the 2 sunnahs of Fajr, you should stand up and read them like you're going to read the fard salah standing up. And then after which you have the 2 of Maghrib and 2 of Isha. So all the 2 sunnahs you have, they all sunnah mu'akkadas, and they all should be read. And the Fajr 2 sunnahs being the most emphasized, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll continue the rest from here on page 98 after namaz, inshallah. So I'll just continue on where we left off. So we spoke about the witr namaz, and then we moved on to the sunnahs. So on page 97 we spoke about the point in order of which sunnahs are more important than the others. And the most important sunnah from all of them was the 2 sunnahs of Fajr. Yeah, and they mentioned in the footnote, I think they mentioned it, that if you miss them, then you do qaza of them as well. So on the same day, if you miss the Fajr namaz, you woke up late, then you do qaza of the 2 sunnahs, and then you do qaza of the 2 farz. That's the sunnahs of Fajr. But with the other prayers, if you miss them, then you don't need to do qaza of them, the sunnahs or the nafal. You just do qaza of the farz. Then after the 2 sunnahs of Fajr, all the other 2 sunnahs are considered sunnah mu'akkadas. So the highest level will be the 2 of Fajr, and then followed by all the other 2. And those 2 are the 2 after the Fard of Zuhr, so 2 sunnahs of Zuhr, and 2 of Maghrib, and 2 of Isha. Then we have the 4 rakat sunnahs as well. The 4 sunnah rakats, which are sunnah mu'akkada, the emphasized ones, are all of them that you read 4 rakats in, apart from the 4 of Isha and the 4 of Asr. The first 4 you read before the Isha namaz and the 4 you read before Asr namaz. Apart from them, all other sunnah, the easiest way to understand, apart from the 4 of Asr and the 4 of Isha, all the other ones are sunnah mu'akkadas and they should be read. You miss them, if you're going to miss them, like for example, it'll be like once every week, once every 2 weeks you miss them. Then, but making a habit of missing them. You don't read it all week, you read them one off, then you're responsible for missing a sunnah mu'akkada and you are sinful for missing a sunnah mu'akkada. As for the 4 of ghayr mu'akkada, the 4 of Asr and the 4 of Isha, they can, even if they miss regularly, like for example, you read them 2 days, you missed 1 day, you read 2 days, that would be irregular, right? So in that case, you won't be sinful for leaving them. But if you abandon them altogether, which people do, is, oh, you don't need to read the sunnahs, are there sunnah ghayr mu'akkada, so they abandon them completely. They don't read the 4 of Isha, the first 4, and they don't read the first 4 of Asr namaz. Then that would entail leaving a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which should be avoided and is misguidance to make, to abandon any of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rest of the points are straightforward that they're mentioning, that whatever rakats that we normally hear, like 4 sunnah, 4 fard, 2 sunnah, 2 nafil, 3 witr, 2 nafil of Isha, all of them have 1 salam at the end. So you won't give salam after 2 rakats or anything like that. The extra thing that they mention here, I don't know if they mention, I'll mention that anyway. The difference between the 4 sunnahs of Isha and Asr and the other 4 sunnahs, which will be the 4 of Jummah, the 4 of Zuhr, the difference will be that the Asr and the Isha ones, you read them as if the 2 rakats and 2 rakats together without the salam. So when you sit down at At-Tahiyyat the first time, you read At-Tahiyyat and you read Durood Sharif as well. Allahumma salli ala. And then when you stand up for the 3rd rakat, you start from Subhanakallah. That's the char of Asr and the char of Isha. So the 4 of Asr and 4 of Isha is as if you're reading 2 nafil and 2 nafil together, but with not doing the salam. So before the salam, you stand up and you start from Subhanakallah again, and then you read. That's how the 4 of Asr and the 4 of Isha are like. But the other ones are straightforward. You read At-Tahiyyat and then you stand up and start from Alhamdulillah again from there, and you do all 4 rakats like that.
Can you read them separate?
No, they should be read together. It's also mentioned here that there's that you can, there's 6 rakats which are normally read after Salatul-Maghrib. There's sunnah to read 6 rakats after Salatul-Maghrib, which you can read as well. So here I mentioned the 6 rakats after Maghrib with 3 salams, so 2 rakats, 2 rakats, and 2 rakats, and they can be read after Maghrib, sorry. Right? They are sunnah as well to read. Obviously the first 2 after Maghrib, they are sunnah mu'akkada and emphasize sunnah. So you have the 3 fard, 2 sunnah mu'akkada, but they are also a narration where you read 6 rakats after Maghrib namaz. Right? So they mentioned the first 2 are sunnah mu'akkada, and the other ones will be ghayr mu'akkada. That's what they're mentioning here. And that the 6 rakats after Salat al-Maghrib. Now they mention some other things that you can, or other times to read. Even though, like, you know, for example, we say it's sunnah to read do nafil after wuzu. See how nafil is used and sunnah is used in the same thing. That's what I mentioned, when the word nafil is used, it includes everything apart from the fard. Right? So how could, and people normally think nafil is the lowest level, then is the sunnahs, and then sunnah ghair muakkada, then sunnah muakkada, then wajib, then farz. But anything apart from the fard and wajib will become under nafil. Right? So the sunnah emphasize sunnahs, the non-emphasize sunnahs, and the optional worship, the voluntary worship. All three will be called nafil. So will be called nafil. Now they're mentioning other times when these non-emphasized sunnahs are done as well. So we know the normal rakats of namaz, fajr, 2 sunnah, 2 fard, maghrib, asr, maghrib, right? Now they're mentioning here that which other times can you read namaz as well, which is a sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do so. So the 2 rakats for greeting the masjid, they call tahiyyatul masjid, before sitting down, in any time which is not disliked. So for example, you enter the masjid for maghrib, isha namaz. Now before isha namaz, you're allowed to read nafil namaz, right? Because we have 4 sunnahs before, so that means obviously you're allowed to read nafil namaz. So you walk inside the masjid, you can read 2 nafil, i.e. the 2 sunnahs of entering the masjid for greeting the masjid. If you sit down, you miss that extra reward, right? But if you read your 4 sunnahs of isha namaz, and at the same time, like imagine you only have 4 or 5 minutes left, you got your 4 sunnahs to read, you don't have time to do this extra few. So if you make the intention that this is my greeting the masjid and my normal 2 sunnahs, then you get the reward of the 2 nafil of greeting the masjid, the 2 sunnahs, and the 4 rakat that you read as well. But if you have extra time, imagine you came 15 minutes before namaz, you can read the 2 separate and then the 4 separate. So if you're early, if it's not makruh time. So makruh time generally you know if before or after the fard there's no namaz. So like after fajr is there any namaz? No sunnat, no nafil. So it's makruh time. You shouldn't be doing any namaz. After now Zohr time starting before the fard there is. So that means you can read nafil before Zohr, in Zohr time. After the fard is there namaz, yes there is the 2 sunnah, 2 nafil. So you can read namaz. Now in Asr, before you can read, but after the Asr farz you can't read. Because there are no sunnah, there's no nafil. Now, after Asr you can't read, that means before Maghrib you can't read, hence before Maghrib there's nothing.
So the question is that some ulama they read, some scholars they say you could read before the Maghrib too.
So normally that's a Shafi'i
opinion.
But that would be within Maghrib time, it won't be before Maghrib. So you give the azan, and in those Shafi areas or Shafi mosques, what they do is, like we do azan and straight away iqamat happens because we've got nothing before the fard al Maghrib. What they do is they do the azan, they give them 4 or 5 minutes, and then after that they do their fard jamaat. So they read the 2 sunnahs. So according to them, there are 2 sunnahs before Maghrib as well, which should be read. In the Hanafi school, those are not read, those 2 sunnahs or that narration that come along those lines. So the Hanafi school, the fard come, you read the fard straight away, and then after that you can read sunnahs and the full.
Let's say someone has Zohr to make a, can they combine
the intention ones?
Yeah.
So general rule, and this is important to know as well, for qaza namaz, a person who has qaza namaz to do, right, he shouldn't be reading nafil namaz. Like for example, for Zohr you have 2 nafil at the end, for Isha you have the 2 nafil, and then you have, after the witr you have 2 nafil. Firstly, those people shouldn't be reading nafil namaz. Even tahajjud is nafil namaz technically. So even if you wake up at tahajjud time, then you read qaza namaz. Every time you have opportunity to read namaz, you basically do qaza namaz. Simple. Yeah, so you keep doing your sunnah mu'akkadas, they emphasize sunnahs. The ulama mentioned that you can also miss the 4 of Asr, the 4 first before Asr, and the 4 of Isha, the one before the Fard, because they less emphasize sunnahs, right? So you can replace them with qaza namaz. So the goal is to complete your qaza namaz as soon as. So even if you came to the masjid, now you got qaza namaz to do, obviously you're not going to read the 2 sunnahs of greeting the masjid. So in that case, when you make the intention to do your qaza namaz, then, and you also have that in your mind, I wanted to do those as well, both will be done. But the intention should be qaza namaz though, right? But Allah knows that what you intend, what you have in your heart, you also like to read those as well. But as a side note, qaza namaz shouldn't be read in public anyway. Right? And so generally some people be reading loads of qaza namaz in public. Because why? Now you're making other people a witness to your namaz, that you missed namaz. Because if you're reading, sometimes people say, oh, my qaza namaz padna sa. Now they've told people that they missed a namaz, so now they've made a witness against themselves on the day of judgment. Right? Another person knows that he's missed a namaz which is fard. Even if you're reading, imagine you're reading your qaza namaz in public, right? Isha time. Obviously, Isha, because there's so much going on, no one's going to be sitting there counting what you're reading, right? He's reading Char, Dora, he's reading qaza. No one knows. But imagine you're doing in the Isha time, in the masjid you're reading Isha namaz. You have to read your 3 witr as well, right? But 3 witr, obviously you raise your hands. If you done that 2-3 times, they get like, how many witr is this guy reading? Then know straight away. So the ulama mentioned, if you're doing a qaza namaz in the masjid in public, or you might be in a scenario where other people, even family members are around, you don't raise your hands for the qunut. You can miss taqa'ah because that's a sunnah to do. So even if you're reading a 3 witr, right, and you're reading in public or in front of family members, whoever it is, and you're about to do the qunut, so normally you do Allahu Akbar, Allahumma inna nasta'inuka. You can just say Allahu Akbar, Allahumma inna nasta'inuka. You can miss the raising the part of the hands. Because then, as soon as you raise your hands, they're going to know you're doing witr. Right? And obviously, you've done your normal 3 Isha ones, and then you do qaza ones. They're like, why is this guy doing twice? One must be qaza, and hence you get caught up, and then you made a witness against yourself. Yeah?
Does that include everything else that is sunnah and more as well for qaza? So like reading the full.
That depends. Like I know what you're gonna say. It depends how much qaza namaz you have. Like if there's a youngster, he's only missed namaz for, I don't know, 2 months, then he should be reading all of his namaz to catch up. But if someone started namaz at 40 years old and they got 20, I don't know, 28, 30 years to read of namaz, right? He's not going to be reading the full thing, 3 tasbeehs, everything. The ulama mentioned that he can cut things out, right? He can make shortcuts. Those things which are, if you just check in the book anyway, those things which come as sunnahs, if you miss them out in his qaza namaz will be done. Right? So, like for example, instead of reading 3 tasbeehs, you read 1 tasbeeh. Instead of reading all the way to the end of up to Ashhadu la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu is farz. After that, you technically can do salam. Right? You can miss the rushif out, and you can. So if someone's got 20 years of qaza namaz to do, he'll use these shortcuts. So something that's taking 3 minutes to read, you can do in 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. So now instead of doing 5 namaz qaza, you can do 7, 8 namaz in the same time qaza. So that's how it works. So generally just checking the book anyway, those things which are sunnahs of the namaz itself, you can cut those out in your qaza namaz, and your qaza namaz will be fine as well. Okay, so the first one they mentioned, other than the normal rakats of namaz, which other ones are sunnah to read? 2 they mentioned when you enter the masjid. The next 2 is 2 before when you do wudu. So there's 2 sunnah rakats of wudu. So you imagine you done fresh wudu, as long as it's not makruh time, right? As long as it's not makruh time, then you read 2 rakats of namaz, 2 rakats of wudu. They're called sunnahs of wudu. So imagine you are home, done fresh wudu for Isha namaz, obviously it's not makruh time. So you've done fresh wudu and your limbs are still somewhat wet. Then you read your 2 nafal at home, which will be for the wudu. And then you come to the masjid, you read the 2 of entering the masjid, and then you read your 4 sultan. Obviously if you got that much spiritual energy to do so, right? Some people are already cutting the normal sultan out, but generally if you got that time and you feel that spiritually is strong enough to do it, then you should try to adopt this extra sunnah as well. On this one there's something important to mention though. It says that the 2 rakats after performing wudu, before the limbs dry. That's not the part I'm touching on. I'll touch upon if you do wudu in masjid, for example. Now you done wudu in the masjid, that wudu water is makruh for that to drop in the masjid. Right? So now you come in, your body soaking, like jaldi parsa namaz in the masjid, and now you got the whole carpet wet. That is makruh to do that in the masjid. Generally the sunnahs are, the Prophet he would read the sunnahs at home and then he would enter the masjid for the Jamaat. But obviously now that in the climate of the society we live, we tend to read the whole namaz in the masjid. So if you've done your wudu in the masjid, you won't basically be drenching the pani, and then you come inside the masjid and the whole carpet's wet as well. And generally any water that leaves your body from wudu is makruh to even get on your clothes. Never mind your musalla or the public place where you're reading namaz in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's something to keep in mind. So here, before the limbs dry, is ideally, they're still going to be a bit wet, but they won't be completely dripping, and you're reading namaz with you. And then normally what happens when water is dripping off your face, it gives you a bit of discomfort, al-khat, and people will be like this. Right? You don't want to be focusing on the water more than you focus on the prayer. Next, we mentioned the 4 to 12 rakats of late morning duha prayer. So this is now after Fajr, sunrise has happened, after 20 minutes, now you can read extra nafil at that time. So before Zuhr, Zawal time, so in the modern, our current time would be, if sunrise is at 5 o'clock, yeah? 5:20 would be makruh time, and the 5:20 all the way to about 11, 12 o'clock. At the moment, I think it's about 1. Until 1 o'clock is the time you can do extra nafil namaz. Right? So something to keep in mind. So you can either do 12 rakats, 4 rakats, or you have to do 12 rakats. Then another thing is any nafil namaz that we call nafil, whenever you feel a bit spiritually high, or any other reason that you want to read for, then you can read 2 nafil. Then say the prayer of making a decision, Suffa-tul-islam. We'll cover that in detail afterwards. But Suffa-tul-islam is generally 2 rakats that you read when you want guidance, when you're seeking guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So imagine you're applying for college, and then you got 2-3 options. So what you do is that you do Salatul-Istikhara, shall I apply for this one, shall I apply for this one, and the dua is basically, oh Allah, if this thing is good for me, good for my deen, good for my akhirah, give it to me. And if it's bad for me, bad for my dunya, bad for my akhirah, then oh Allah, keep it away from me. And whatever happens, consider that the result of your istikhara. You know, sometimes we hear that you're going to see a dream like this, and if this happens in the dream or that happens in the dream, it doesn't have to be like that. So you might have a dream, you might not have a dream. But if the thing happens, according to the hadith, if that thing happens, then consider your istikhara was meant to, i.e. Allah's guiding you towards that thing. And if the thing doesn't happen, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved you from that. So normally, it was a custom of the Muslims that they would do this for everything. And I mean, now people just do it for main things. As the only one I know people always talk about is rishta. Yeah, when they get a rishta, they're like, let's do istikhara. Apart from that, they forget about istikhara. But generally, istikhara should be done for anything. Imagine you're buying a car, and one friend is saying, Audis are rubbish, the other one saying, no, Audis are good. Then you can do istikhara. That tomorrow, maybe you're going to buy the car tomorrow. You do istikhara, read it through for all life is good for me, and then good for my dunya, akhirah, i.e. means of transport to earn risk, right? Then Allah, give it to me. And if it's bad for me, keep it away from me. Might happen in the morning. If it's good for you, you could go there, everything goes sweet, it happens. You could wake up in the morning, the guy's like, mate, I've got a better offer, I'm not giving it to you. That'll be your istikhara, Allah saying that I'm saving you from the tribulations or the difficulty that God would have brought to you. So that would be your kind of jawab to that. But we'll discuss that later on. It mentions that later on. So now, another thing is Salatul Haja, that is also discussed later on as well. Then the night prayer before the 2 days of Eid. So, Chand Raat basically. The Chand Raat, which is spent in Bury Park and all these main roads, that's the night of Ibadah. That's where Sunnah is to do worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the night when du'as are accepted. And so that Chand Raat should be utilized in the best manner in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he said the night prayer of the last 10 days of Ramadan, and that's straightforward as well. the night prayer during the first 10 nights of Dhul Hijjah. So as we know, the day of Arafat is on the 9th, Hajj is normally on the 10th. So the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, then they should be spent, those nights should be spent in ibadah and doing dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously, as we know, it's a 1 month away. And so normally there's 1 month, 2 months difference between Big Eid and Small Eid, as we call it, right? Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. So after the 2 months, then the 10 days will start, and then on the 10th day we have our Eid party. And then the last one I mentioned here is the middle night of Sha'ban, which is the 15th of Sha'ban. Shab-e Bara'a, they also call it as well. And the other names can't have in mind. But anyway, basically the 15th night of Sha'ban, which is a common practice amongst the Ahl Sunnah, that we spend the night in ibadah. Is also proven that, you know, people go to the graveyard on that night to do dua, and this should, even if you do go to the graveyard, it should be done in the right adab. I know there's some groups, they take, in the middle of the night, they take the ladies to the graveyard as well, and that happens in this town, unfortunately. But the women should be encouraged, even when it comes to the fiqh aspect, right? The women are encouraged to read namaz at home, and within the house, read namaz in a room where you're more secluded, i.e. like a bedroom, somewhere, you know, you're not reading in the middle of the living room and in the middle of the house. You should be reading in the most private part of the house as well. So if that's the state of namaz, hence going to Jamaat in the masjid, which is 27 times more reward for men, then women are encouraged to pray at home, i.e. something which is wajib, the ulama have written. It's necessary for men to be reading the Jamaat. This is some of the opinions, right? That you're sinful for missing Jamaat. On the other hand, the women are told, don't come to the masjid, stay at home. And then the people are taking those same women who are practicing, hence they're celebrating or worshipping on the night of 15th of Sha'ban. They should encourage the sister, you're worshipping, either you stay in the masjid or stay at home. But they've been unfortunately dragged or motivated to come to the Qabristan for a special dua, which shouldn't be done, especially with the modern fitnas that we have, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from those fitnas, inshallah. Okay, the next one I'll just wrap you up shortly, as Ramadan is gone, so everyone knows about Suffa-tul-islam. So Suffa-tul-islam is an emphasized sunnah mu'akkada for both men and women. It's 20 rakats, not 8 rakats. And the 8 rakat one is generally, the proof for that is the tahajjud namaz, the one we mentioned before. Right? The tahajjud namaz is 8 rakats, the night prayer. So those people who use, or they say it's 8 rakats, they use the tahajjud hadith, which is for all year round, 8 rakats, that they use that one as a proof for the night prayer of Ramadan. Hence, but in all 4 schools, all 4 madhabs, the Hanafi, Shafi, Maliki and Hanbalis, none of them read 8 rakats. This is a new thing that's come about, that Tarawih Salah is 8 rakats, but all 4 schools hold the opinion that Tarawih Namaz is 20 rakats. So it should be made clear, like I did here this Ramadan, when I told them that if you're reading 8, by all means, Bismillah, you can believe, but know that you haven't fulfilled the Sunnah according to the 4 schools. The correct understanding is 20 rakats. Then some people stay behind, read 20, and those who still told is 8, they left. Yes, but generally keeping in mind that Tarawih Namaz is 20 rakats. And it should be read in the Isha Namaz time after the Fard of Isha Namaz. Also, let me just briefly summing this up. Normally after 4 rakats, we read 2, then we read 2, and then we read the tasbih. But generally, the method used to be that after 4 rakats, they would have a rest, they would relax. And in some countries they still do that, some areas where they have like a little tea break. And so the time you take to read 4 rakats, they relax in that time. So if it takes just say 6 minutes to read 4 rakats, then they'll chill for 4 to 6 minutes, and then they'll read the 4 rakats again, and then they'll relax. So they'll have a pause between each one. But here obviously it doesn't work like that in the UK. People are already in a rush, like Jaldi ka Imam needs to be faster, even though he's reading 100 miles per hour already in some places, right? So what should happen is that's why it's only short, and hence the Imams or the masjids normally, they just read the tasbih of Taraweeh, which takes 20 seconds, and they stand up again. Even though I noticed this Ramadan, I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to be harsh. But when the Imam's checking after the 4, obviously we had a young Imam who was double checking. I told him to use his Quran just to check, and there's no rush, right? And so when he was checking his Quran, people would stand up and try to I don't know, put pressure on him, the Jaldi ka stand up. Yeah, so this shouldn't be the case. When the Imam stands up, you stand up. Right? What happens and what was happening with some people is they'll stand up and then they'll cough and try to say that we're standing, mate, Jaldi ka, right? But that is not the correct adab. Anyway, you go, not just this masjid, any masjid here you go, the adab is that you wait for the Imam. Even if the Imam's late, Jamaat happens when the Imam's ready, not when the clock's ready. Right? So this is something to keep in mind. Anywhere we go, is unfortunately our people, and this is like anything like, for example, this class, even on the poster it say 8:30 to 9:30. If the Ustad wants to carry on the class to 12 o'clock, the class is till 12 o'clock. You know, like we're going to be teaching the youngsters, they'll be like, Ustad, can you go? I said, why? It's 8 o'clock. Yeah? But the class finishes when the Ustad finishes. That same adab should be for any general Islamic that we have, anything that we have. If there's someone as our Amir, our Imam, then we go by his rule. Right? We don't follow, even like for example, imagine us guys were at Umrah and Habib was our Amir. If he says we're not going to this place, we're going to stay in our hotel. I'll give you my example. I went to Masjid al-Aqsa with one of the Imams, and there was like obviously the zulm that is done in Masjid al-Aqsa, right? So what happened was we were going to the masjid from one of the entrances, and next minute behind the wall, the boundary wall, we hear shooting. So the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers, because they're terrorists, right? They shot one of the Palestinian guys and they killed him. So next minute, all these cars came, these armies and all that, right? We were told to leave, and then all the the Muslim vendors who selling their fruits and all that, they broke all the stools, they kicked everything down, and like we're here now. And then obviously we went back to our hotel. Then when we went back to our hotel, obviously the Amir who we were gone with, the Sheikh who we were gone with, we're under his supervision. Even though I can't say I'm the Imam, I know what to do, I'm allowed to go. No. If your leader says you're staying in your hotel, you're staying in your hotel. Hence he said, look, we've seen this happen with the ladies with their children, so until I say it's safe for you, or I feel that it's safe, then we're going to go back out. So he made us stay in the hotel for 24 hours, right? And he gave us on the same street, he said, you're allowed to go to that corner shop and that corner shop. Anyway, past that, that means you've broken the rule, and I'm the Amir. So we had two brothers, may Allah grant him Jannah, for the sincerity, and they were like, I paid for this, I'm not doing, and next minute they gone shopping with the missus and all that, and then the Sheikh was like, what's going on here, where this guy's gone? And they're like, oh, they said we paid for this and so on. And they had a rant at you basically, and then they chipped. Those obviously what they did was, even though they paid for it, because they paid to go under a Sheikh or an Imam or a leader, right? It's called an Amir. Then you follow the Amir's rule, like it or not. He says you're not leaving the hotel, you're not leaving the hotel. He says you're going out, go chill, then you got the choice, obviously, he's not going to force you to get out of the hotel. But generally, so this is how it should be applied. So this is not only for like namaz or anything. Whenever you do something as a Muslim, as a group, whoever is in charge, you go by his timing, you go by his, basically, unless he's asking for advice, shall we do this, what do you think is better, and mashwara is called, right? Doing mashwara is sunnah as well, and generally the Amir would do that, and then he did sit us down, he went through, this is what I told you, this is the safety reasons, and my responsibility, you guys broke the rule, and hence, okay, after this namaz, you're free to go, and then we were allowed to go to the masjid again. So this is something to keep in mind as a side note. Also, you mentioned a slight difference between the reading with Jamaat for the Tarawih namaz. Sorry, reading Tarawih namaz with Jamaat is like a wajib kifaya or sunnah kifaya, which means the way you have Fard Ain and Fard Kifaya. Fard Ain is every namaz, a personal obligation. So your 5 namaz are your fards, my 5 namaz are my fards. That's called Fard Ain. Then there's called a Fard Kifaya, a community fard. So imagine there's a janazah in Luton, 3 of you guys went. The fard is lifted from our shoulders as well. If no one of us guys went, imagine we're the only people, right? We all miss the janazah, then we all miss the fards. So one is a personal farz, one is a community farz. Same way with the sunnahs, some are personal sunnahs, some are community sunnahs. So the Tarawih namaz, reading with Jamaat, is the kifaya, sunnah kifaya. So if some people, which happens, read in the masjid, others read at home, as long as people got together and read in that community in the masjid, then that sunnah is fulfilled. If everyone abandoned it, everyone said car person is quicker, then we don't have to read the full Quran, then everyone will be sinful for missing that sunnah. So this is something to keep in mind as well. It mentions also the same thing about reading the full Quran. It should be done at least someone in the community. Some people who reading at home, most likely they're not going to read the full Quran. If you're reading in a masjid where they'll do short surahs, obviously you're not going to finish Quran. But the whole community should not abandon finishing the Quran in Ramadan. Right? So someone or some places should uphold that. And a lot of people say, mosques should be with the time and they should do short surahs in Ramadan to accommodate all the people. That's not the way forward. Right? If someone wants to read short surahs, Bismillah, go read at home in your front room with your family. Because the standard of the mosque, at least people once a year they listen to Quran. Some brothers, they never listen to Quran. Or they never read Quran, maybe they don't know how to read Quran. And this is the only opportunity that they get to listen to the full Quran by reciting to someone. Right? So it shouldn't be abandoned. So especially the Jamia mosques, they should in the Luton, it'll be,
Central.
Yeah, central masjid. Even like this masjid, because the community is so vast, and central masjid from here is like 2-3 miles, so it's like a totally different community if you really think about it, right? So even like at Hira Masjid, they are quite a big distance, so there's a lot of population between them. So generally, the main mosques shouldn't. Those who have these community centers here and there, Bismillah, do your short surahs, and those who read in these places. But the mosques should keep going with the full Quran. And I like how the author jumps from one side to the other. He said, if you can't read the full Quran, then read Naate Nakal Kausar. The shortest surah of the Quran. Right? So, that is for those people who are not going to read any namaz. They're going to miss it altogether. For them, chalo read Qul Huwallahu Ahad and Qul A'udhu bin Nas. But I like the way he jumped. If the full Quran is difficult for the congregation, burdensome, just read Qul Huwallahu Ahad. Right? So, you should have a middle ground as well. So some places where they can't read the full Quran, or it might be too difficult. I know some places what they do is they read half the surah as a group. They sit down like this, and they read the half the surah like this, and then the other half they read it in the Tarawih. Or they do the Taraweeh, they read half a para, then they sit down, everyone just listens, the Imam just grabs this Quran and he reads the other half sitting down. So some places do like this as well. Some places what they do is, obviously they got their own variations. They read the full para sitting down like this, and then they read the Qul Huwallahu in there with the Taraweeh namaz. But either way, generally the main thing is that they should at least try to keep the sunnah of reading the full Quran in the month of Ramadan. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the tawfiq to do amal of this, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll stop here and we'll continue from the next time. آمين. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.